Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. Welcome to Module 2 of the Droner's Guide to the 2019 Canadian RPAS Regulations. In this module, we're going to cover two topics: pilot certification under the Advanced Operations subject, as well as flight reviews, both of which are required in order to get your Advanced Operations pilot certification. We'll be covering these topics down here, the regulations that cover these two areas. Before we begin, let me remind you that the entire presentation package from the Droner's Guide to the 2019 RPAS Regulations is available for a nominal fee. See the link in the description below for how to purchase it. What you'll get is a PDF soft copy format of the entire package of all 8 modules. It will be over 100 pages in length, covering every one of the 901 regulations that we talk about in the modules of this training program. For each one, there's a clear explanation for each and every rule, and there are active links to additional resources. As a bonus, I offer a free starter droning logbook with your purchase of the Droner's Guide material. What you'll get is an Excel spreadsheet soft copy file with multiple tabs in it, each one of which is customizable for all the required logs and procedures. I'll provide you a starter procedure, and then you can customize it for your own situation. Why start from scratch? Use mine. First of all, let's review what the difference is between a basic and an advanced operation when it comes to RPAS. RPAS, again, is Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. So in a basic operation, you need to stay away from airports and controlled airspace. With an advanced operations certificate, on the other hand, and an appropriate drone, you can fly within 5.6 kilometers of an airport and 1.9 kilometers of a heliport, and even in controlled or restricted airspace, assuming you have approval, and we'll cover the specific regulations around that. In addition, again, if you have the right drone, this is the tricky part. If you have the right drone, you can fly basically right up to people, which is called flying close to people within 5 meters. You can also fly right over people, and by people here I refer to bystanders, as I did in the previous video. Advertised events you are still not allowed to fly at, even with your Advanced Operations certificate. And you can fly any drone, but in order to perform these operations up here, you need to be on the Transport Canada approved list, and we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. What do you need to fly? Well, in the basic operations scenario, all you needed to do was pass the online pilot exam, which was tough enough. Well, in the advanced operations, you need to not only pass the pilot exam online, which is a little tougher than the basics exam, but you also have to pass a personal flight review, and you have to be flying an approved drone in order to perform some of these higher-end activities. All right, so there's a review of basic versus advanced operations. And this is defined in Rule 901.62, Advanced Operations Application. And it basically says, pretty much what I said on the table there: you're performing an advanced operation if any of the following apply. You're flying in controlled airspace, you're flying between 5 meters and 30 meters away from bystanders when flying a drone approved for flying close to people, or you could be flying over bystanders when flying a drone approved for flying over people, or you could fly within 5.6 kilometers of an airport or 1.9 kilometers of a heliport. Any of these things, if you're doing them, you are performing an advanced operation. These rules here refer to from 901.62 to 901.69 A, B, and C, which basically define these 3 A, B, and C criteria, and each of those in turn refer to 901.71, which is talking about flying in controlled airspace, 901.72, which also talks about airspace, and 901.73, which talks about flying close to airports, as mentioned down here. All right, let's get into it a little more deeply. The next 2 regulations are 901.63, which are the pilot requirements, and 90164, how you get issued a certificate. Well, I mean, there's a lot of words there, but basically what this means is that for advanced operations flights, you need to have an advanced operations pilot certificate. And the requirements, as I've stated, are two. You need to pass the advanced operations exam, and there's a link to the exam. So if you've purchased the PDF copy of the presentation material for the Droner's Guide, these links will be active in that presentation. This is a link to the advanced operations exam so that you can take it. And here's a link to set up your personal flight review. Both of those you need to pass in order to get your certificate. Also, you need to be at least 16 years old. Now, if you're less than 16, children under 16, you can still fly an advanced operation flight, but you must be under the direct supervision of a pilot who does have their advanced operations pilot certificate. Your pilot certificate is valid for 2 years. 90165 talks about recency requirements. Now, it doesn't really expire at the end of 2 years, but you need to revalidate it. This is the way Transport Canada explained it to me, at least. To revalidate it, you need to either retake the exam, which is a fairly straightforward approach, or you can pass a flight review that proves that you have had recency in terms of the issues related to an advanced operations exam, or you can take what's called recurrent training at an approved flight school. All of these recency requirements and acceptable training are defined in section 92104 of a completely separate document called Standard 921, and I've got a link here. Small remotely piloted aircraft and visual line of sight. This document talks about the training requirements and the exam requirements and the expectations. Next, 90166. When you're performing an advanced operation, you have to have your pilot certificate accessible. So what this means is that you need to be able to access your pilot certificate or proof that you've recertified, which is a strange mention here, but there you go, during a flight operation. So I recommend you simply print off your pilot certificate that you get in an email form when you pass the exam and the flight review, and you keep it with your drone gear or be able to pull it up on your phone. How do you pass the exam? Which is number one of the two key requirements. First of all, it's exactly the same as the basic exam in terms of the regulations around this. In fact, 90167, the examination rules for advanced operations, refers back to 90158, which is the basic exam rules as well. Pretty straightforward. You must take the exam yourself without help from anyone else at the time. You can't copy or remove any of the exam questions, and if you fail, you need to wait 24 hours before retaking the exam. Every time you retake the exam, there's a $10 fee. And like I said, it's a very similar format to the basic operations exam. It's online. In this case, there's 50 questions instead of 35 in the basic exam. You have only a 60-minute time slot in order to finish your exam, and you need to get 80% of the questions correct in order to pass. And like I said, there's a $10 fee per attempt. Now, this is where it gets tricky with advanced operations. For advanced operations, the model of drone that you are flying must be approved by Transport Canada based upon what they call a manufacturer's declaration of safety. And that manufacturer's declaration of safety can be in one or more of 3 specific classes. Class 1, or A, is the ability to fly in controlled airspace. Class 2, or B rather, is the ability to fly between 5 meters and 30 meters horizontally of bystanders. This is referred to as flying close to people. And C, able to fly within 5 meters of bystanders, which is referred to as over people. So if you're within 5 meters, you're considered over these people. All right, and there's a link here with the approved drone list. At the time of this recording, there were only 33 drones on that list. Pretty high-end drones, to be perfectly honest. I'll get into the technical requirements that the manufacturer must meet for each of these 3 standards in another video, in Module 3 in fact. So you'll be able to see what that basically means. 90170 is about operating a drone that's been approved, that meets the technical requirements, but now you've modified it. So if you modify a drone that is permitted for advanced operations, you must be able to prove that it still meets those same technical requirements for safety. And those technical requirements, as I mentioned, I'll talk about it in Module 3 of the video series. There is a link here to that standard. This is standard 922 for remotely piloted aircraft systems, safety assurance. Regulation number 90171 is some detail about operating in controlled airspace. So if you're flying an advanced operation in controlled airspace, you need authorization in advance from the air traffic controller, sometimes referred to as the provider of air traffic services, for the area you're flying. You must provide information about your flight in advance, and I'll show you the long list of details on the next page. And it mentions specifically in the regulation that air traffic control may authorize you to exceed the normal maximum altitude if that's part of your desired flight for this operation. And incidentally, the designated airspace handbook, here's a link here, it's a PDF, defines all of Canadian airspace, so you can tell where airspace is and isn't and things like that. Here's the information you need to provide to air traffic control according to Rule 90171. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but the basic gist of it is when you're flying, what kind of drone you're flying or aircraft in terms of the registration number and physical characteristics, whereabouts you're flying in the area of operation, the route you're using to get there, the proximity of the area to manned aircraft approaches and departures, so you have to be familiar with the area and manned aircraft traffic patterns, how you're going to communicate with the air traffic control unit, your name as a pilot, contact information, and your pilot certificate number. And that would be for any pilot of the aircraft that is going to be operating at this time. You also have to provide the procedures and flight profiles you are intending to follow in case of a lost command and control link, and your emergency situation procedures, and the process and time required to terminate the operation. In other words, close down your flight. And if they ask for it, you're required to provide any other information that they ask for in terms of their ability to provide air traffic management. Okay, so it's reasonable information to request if you're flying within a controlled area, and that'll give you a heads up as to what to provide people. This is a strange rule, sort of one of these, of course you should do this. Well, if you're flying an advanced operation in controlled airspace, well, guess what? You must follow all instructions from air traffic control. No kidding. Sounds like a good rule. That's Rule 90172. 90173 gives you some details about flying near airports and heliports. So if you're flying an advanced operation within 3 nautical miles, and strangely enough, this rule is only in nautical miles, not in metric, so 3 nautical miles of an airport or 1 nautical mile from a heliport, you must follow the procedures applicable to that airport or heliport. Again, a sensible rule. The only catch is, how do you know what those procedures are? So there's a definitive list of all of the Canadian aerodromes and how to contact them, called the Canadian Flight Supplement, and it's referred to in several places in the regulations. The only catch with that is that you have to pay for it from NAV Canada. When I checked, I believe it was about $16.95 to access this document. You do have access to a soft copy or a hard copy, but even the soft copy is there's a charge for it. Some aerodromes are listed on this simple website here for Transport Canada operated airports. Those are the major ones. And I would also urge you to check the National Research Council site called the UAV Site Selection Tool, and there's a link again in the PDF that if you choose to purchase the PDF from me. And this is an online map that shows aerodromes and restricted areas and names them and allows you to figure out who you would need to contact if you were going to be flying in those zones. The only catch at this time, this video is recorded prior to the new rules being implemented, it still refers to pre-2019, what's called the interim rules, but the places are still the same. So those are the Advanced Operations Regulations. Let's talk about flight reviews now. Well, here's a good one. You must be a flight reviewer to do flight reviews. 901(82), and it's called a prohibition. To perform the duties of a flight reviewer, you must A, hold an Advanced Operation Pilot Certificate plus the flight reviewer rating, and you must be affiliated with, which I presume means work for, a Transport Canada accepted flight school, which is what they refer to as a training provider. So the rules are very complicated with lots and lots of references, but essentially what they're saying is they're talking about the basic operations recency requirements, the Advanced Operations Certificate and its recency requirements, and 901(83), which is the next rule we'll talk about, which are the requirements for being a flight reviewer, and 921(05), which is in that other standard, which talks about flight schools declaring affiliation with a flight reviewer. To become a flight reviewer, and please note, this doesn't mean to take a review. This is to become the person who does the flight review upon you, if you wish. You have to be at least 18 years old. You have to hold an Advanced Operations Pilot Certificate for at least 6 months and still meet the recency requirements. And you have to pass the flight reviewer exam, which is another one of these online exams. It's similar to the basic or advanced operations exam. It's online, it's 30 questions, there's a 90-minute time limit, and you have to pass 80% of the questions. The tricky part is that there's a $50 fee per attempt. This is the exam to become a flight reviewer. And again, just like the basic and advanced operations exams, you have to take the exam yourself. You can't copy or remove the exam questions, and you need to wait 24 hours before retaking the exam. Again, this is the rules if you want to become a flight reviewer. So, flight schools must provide Transport Canada with the names of all flight reviewers affiliated with them. If you recall, flight reviewers have to declare that they're affiliated with a flight school, while the flight school also has to declare which flight reviewers work with them. And they are expected, the flight school is expected to ensure that any flight reviews that are done in their name are held properly, they're done properly. So this is perhaps the most interesting piece of all of this, and that is how flight reviews are actually conducted. So if you've got your Advanced Operations Pilot exam covered off, now you go for your flight review with one of these flight reviewer guys. How is it actually conducted? 901(87) says that, but really what it does is it points off to Standard 921, and there's a link here to that, by the way. And here's what actually happens at that flight review. First of all, you need to pay a fee to the flight reviewer. These fees vary from flight school to flight school. I've heard quotes in the area of $200 per flight review. This is not a Transport Canada fee. This is a fee that you're paying to the flight reviewer or the flight school. So flight reviews are conducted one-on-one. So there's you as the potential pilot and the flight reviewer in person, not online. This is in person. And you use your own drone, and the following topics are covered in your flight review. First of all, they confirm that your drone is actually registered. That would be horrible if you arrive with a drone that's not registered and get booted out because of that. Second of all, they confirm that you, the candidate, has written procedures according to 901.23. Now we'll get to this in another module. I think it's module 8, in fact, the very last module, that talks about the requirement to have written down procedures for normal operations. This is like pre-flight checklists and takeoff checklists and things like that, as well as emergency procedures. What happens if you lose contact with your drone, for example. So they'll confirm that you have those in writing, so you better have them available. And you need to demonstrate both the knowledge of and the ability to perform. So you will be asked to do these things. The site survey process, again, we'll talk about that in Module 8. Emergency procedures, reporting incidents. What do you do if you crash into an airplane or something horrible happens? Pre-flight checks, takeoff. You'll be expected to be able to take off with your drone. Navigating around obstacles. Recognition of distances. That's an interesting one. So you need to know what this magic 100-foot away, 30 meters distance is and things like that. And be able to estimate that by eye, so you can't bring your tape measure along with you. And the landing, actually landing your aircraft safely. All right, so that's how a flight review is actually done. I'd love to hear comments from people who have gone through a flight review. I have not, to see if anything else is covered when you are being reviewed and how the actual experience feels. All right, very good. Now we've completed Module 2, covering Advanced Operations, Pilot Certification, and Flight Reviews, all the regulations in the new 2019 Canadian RPAS regulations associated with those topics. The next module I would recommend you take is which drones are acceptable for advanced operations and the technical requirements around those. And in that same Module 3, I cover the topic of special flight operations, the SFOC certification. As I've mentioned a few times, the presentation material that I provide in this module, as well as all the other modules, is available as a PDF file from the link in the description below. There is a nominal fee for this material, and you get as a bonus an Excel spreadsheet version of all the starter set of the procedures and checklists and flight logs and all that kind of stuff that you are expected to have. This will provide you a starting point to prepare your own customized material. Thank you again. Hope you subscribe. Comment below if you have comments, suggestions, or appreciation for this video. Thank you very much.